Hello, everyone. Today I want to talk to you about the concept of cost basis, other terms you might hear it be called by, why we should probably never use cost basis, and something that we should use instead of cost basis that'll be way more beneficial to us. So let's first begin with what cost basis is. So imagine you bought a stock for $100 and it went to $102. So you purchased one share at $100, your cost basis would be $100. Now, that's pretty straightforward, but imagine if you made multiple purchases. So let's just say WoW is at $102. You bought one more share, and then it went to $104. Well, your cost basis is then going to be the average of the $100 you bought originally and the $102 you bought later on, which would mean you have a cost basis now of $101. Pretty straightforward, right? It gets a little bit more complicated if you make multiple purchases. For example, if you bought three shares at $102. And then what you would do is you'd say three out of the four shares were purchased at $102, and one out of the four shares was purchased at $100. So your cost basis is now $101.50 because you do 3/4 times 102 plus 1/4 times 100. Okay, so that's cost basis. Now let's explain why we shouldn't use cost basis. And first, I'm going to start with kind of more the psychology and the framework to investing. It's not going to be groundbreaking by any means, but I think it's something that has to be said. And we're going to start by one of the more common ways you hear people use the term cost basis. And that's when people say, I'm lowering my cost basis. So, what does that mean? Imagine you only had two securities within your circle of competence, and that is Alibaba, ticker symbol BABA, and Facebook, ticker symbol FB. Now, let's just say both stocks, I'm just going to throw random numbers out. We're selling, we'll say Alibaba was at $200 and Facebook was at 300. Well, we as value investors don't take the share price for what it's worth. Instead, we try to figure out a valuation for these companies. So what we do is we look at Alibaba and we say, well, it's trading at 200, but I think it's worth $300 a share. And we look at Facebook and we say the same thing, $300 a share. Well, if you had money come into your portfolio, you would see Alibaba is undervalued by $100. So let's just say you purchased one share at $200. Now let's imagine some time went on and both of these stocks fell. Alibaba went to $100 and Facebook went to $200. Well, let's just say at this point you reevaluate the situation and you feel Alibaba's intrinsic values fell and is now represented by $100. And Facebook, on the other hand, actually remained at $300. You still think it's worth $300, even though it fell to $200. Well, the people who focus primarily on lowering your cost basis will see that they purchased one share of Alibaba at 200, and if they purchase one share at $100, their cost basis goes from 200 to the average of 200 and 100, which is 150. So they've lowered their cost basis. This isn't the right framework we want to work on, right? Because if money entered the portfolio now, we want to put it in a place that's going to optimize uh, our money. So we're going to put it into Facebook because it's undervalued, whereas Alibaba now we believe is fairly valued. So the right framework isn't basing it off of lowering your cost basis whatsoever, but instead by optimizing your opportunity cost. Say that three times fast. So that's kind of the framework, but that I know isn't groundbreaking by any means, and I'm going to shatter cost basis in a second. But let's first talk about what cost basis actually shows us. And the reason why I do that is because recently I picked up this mental model, which is a framework for how you think about tackling a problem, which I call yin yang, which is essentially finding both good and bad in things. Just not every time or not anything is going to be 100% good or 100% bad. There's a balance, and it's not a 50-50% balance. Sometimes it's weighted more in the favor of something different. But what I'm trying to get at is cost basis is going to tell you things. I just don't think it's practical. So here's what cost basis tells you. If you bought a stock for $100 and it went down to 50, and you bought at 100 and you bought at 50, your cost basis, like we've said before, is $75. This $75 represents your break even price. That means if the stock went from 100 to 50 and then to $75, you would break even. You would have a $0 profit. And that's because the $100 that you put in lost 25 and the $50 you put in gained 25. and they cancel each other out. So that way you have a gain of $0. So that's your break even, and that's what cost basis is really telling us. Now, why is it not important to us? Well, it's at my core principles and beliefs that I believe most people would be best off passively investing in a broad-based index fund, namely the S&P 500 index. So I believe people have this benchmark where if they're picking stocks rather than passively investing, they should be doing better. Otherwise, what's the point of picking stocks other than for entertainment or education? But we'll ignore that. In terms of trying to make the most amount of money, you would hope that if you pick stocks, you do better than just doing nothing and passively indexing as soon as money came in, right? So what you really want to do is measure whether the investments you're making are accomplishing your goal, outperforming, or if they're underperforming. Cost basis isn't going to tell you that because it ignores the two fundamental things that everything in finance is based upon, and that is knowing how much and when. So let me explain that by breaking down one at a time. So how much? If I told you my cost basis is $75, you have no idea what my transaction history was. Did I buy a stock at $100 and then I went down to $50 for a cost basis of 75? Or did I buy a stock at $99 and $51? Both of these instances give you a cost basis of $75. But you have two completely different, I'm not going to say completely different, but you can get a huge amount of variations in how you get to a $75 cost basis. So how much isn't shown with cost basis? Now let's move on to when. So let's imagine you had a stock that was trading for $100 and 1 year goes by. So 1 year, the stock is still trading at $100. Now let's just say in one day, for whatever reason, it shoots up to $200. Let's take two investors, investor red and investor green. Investor red put his money in, or her, or anything in between, put their money in January 1st, 2021, right here where I indicated with an arrow. 1 year and 1 day goes by, so January 2nd, 2022, and ignore holidays and weekends for now. We're looking at the performance. Well, investor red had a cost basis of $100 and now has $200. Let's now take investor green and say they put money in on January 1st, 2022, so 1 year after. Now, both investors held to $200 and both investors have a $100 cost basis, but the green investor did a lot better because they made 100% gain in 1 day rather than the red investor who did 100% gain in 1 year and 1 day, right? So we're missing that time value of money that's crucial for us in determining performance. So there's no when factor. Not only do we not get this when factor, but there's other considerations that come up because of this. For example, notice that because the red investor held for 1 year and 1 day, they're going to be hit with long-term capital gains tax, whereas the green investor is going to be hit with short-term capital gains tax. Your cost basis can't tell you that whatsoever. Also, imagine now that the red investor, instead of putting $100 in, put $99 in, and then had it turned to 200 over a course of 1 year and 1 day. Well, if you look at the cost basis between the red investor and the green investor, it looks like the red investor did better because they purchased at $99 instead of the 100 that the green investor did. However, if you ask me, I would much rather a $100 gain off of $100 in 1 day than a $99 gain to 200. I'm sorry, a $101 gain in 1 year and 1 day. I can make up the one extra dollar with the money I have based on the difference. So that is one way we can be duped, but there is a very duplicitous way that we can be duped that's even worse than any of these examples, and something we have to be extremely, extremely mindful of. And that is people, whether they want to be deceitful or not, can deceive you if you base your analysis off cost basis. Imagine someone bought a stock for $100 and it went down to $50. Then they ended up selling at $50 and then repurchasing the stock at $50 that same moment. The stock then shoots up to $75. Well, if I were a really deceitful person, I can show you my portfolio and show you that whatever stock I invested in, I had a cost basis of $50 and I made this 50% gain to $75 in the course of how many days, whatever. But that's not the truth of the matter, right? We're looking at this entire picture here. Whereas a deceitful person can show you just a fragment of it. They can only show you a little bit of the picture, right? And you can think that they're a genius when in reality, they didn't do too well. Going back to the tax basis concept too, imagine if I didn't take advantage of tax loss harvesting. So if I actually did this in the same moment, for those who don't know, tax loss harvesting is this concept where you can take advantage of your losses. So say here we lost $50, and instead of paying tax right here on $25, we can say, well, we lost $50 and we gained 25, so we're not gonna pay taxes essentially. And we don't need to get any further into that, but essentially you don't get the note through cost basis because it doesn't tell you the time value of money. It doesn't tell you how many days in between. Also, people can do this across multiple stocks. So if they go from $100 to $50 and then sell it and then move it into another stock at $50 and it goes up to $75, same thing. I can show you this stock and make it look like I'm a genius, right? So that's something we extremely need to be careful of. So for all these reasons, we probably shouldn't be using cost basis. It's not practical for us. And that is, cost basis isn't comparable because it ignores how much and when. Cost basis doesn't give us any sense of taxes. And duplicitous people can deceive us essentially. So for all these reasons, we need to find a better way of demonstrating um, our cost basis method, or really what we're trying to demonstrate to people. That is, are we accomplishing our goal? And this is how we're going to do it. You provide your entire transaction history. So if I were to give you, instead of a cost basis of $75, if I gave you the fact that on January 1st, 2021, I put $100 into a portfolio, and I told you that on January 1st, 2022, 1 year later, I put $50 into the portfolio, and the stock now is trading at $200. You can measure how well I'm doing in comparison to benchmark, which is our goal, by taking the $100 at this exact time and imagining what would happen if I put it into the S&P 500, and doing the same for the $50. At this exact time, I put $50 into the S&P 500 index. What would my end result be? And this is how we can compare results. This is how we can see if we accomplish our goals. This is how we can track tax advantages or disadvantages, and so much more. So really, we shouldn't use cost basis, and instead we should use transaction history. So that's all I have for you today. As always, in the description, I have any resources or corrections. But that's it. Thanks so much for watching. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave me something in the comments.